All right, so it's been about 2 hours since I put down the liquid mask. Again, I used the Schmincke Rubbelkrepp liquid mask, and it basically is kind of like rubber cement in texture. You use a brush and you apply it over places that you want to mask and protect the white of the paper so you don't paint on it. And you wait a little bit, and after it dries, then it's ready to be painted over. And after you've painted over it, then we can actually use your finger to remove it. It feels just like rubber cement coming off, and then it'll expose the paper underneath. So now I'm gonna tape down the paper. You'll notice that I just have a single border around it. I did do another video linked below where I talked about how I put down 2 borders depending on the size of the paper that I need. Here, this is basically already a quarter sheet of one single large arches piece of paper, which is 22 by 30, and this is a quarter of that, so it's 11 by 15. I don't need to size it down any further. All I need to do is basically tape up to the pencil line, the border here that I've drawn, and basically that's going to be the outer edge of my image here. I used this ruler basically to make these straight edges. So that's one way of making sure that I have a true rectangle. So now I'm just gonna tape these down, making sure that I have a long enough piece of tape that covers the entire width of the paper so that I don't have any breaks in between. And I'm gonna do that on all 4 edges. And you'll notice that the edges of this paper are actually deckled. That means you can see the torn edge. It's kind of a nice effect. And what I've already planned to do is I'm not gonna, when I frame this painting, I'm gonna have it floating on top of a backboard, and it'll just be floating underneath the glass. That's why I'm okay with not having a double border here where I need to cut the paper down further. I'm just gonna leave the edges of this exposed, and this paper will actually just sit on top of the backing board inside the frame. So it'll have a nice floating art effect. And notice that as I'm taping this, I'm making sure to overlap at the corners just to make it pretty much skin tight all the way around. I'm just gonna use the end of my brush, or you can use pretty much anything, maybe a credit card, business card, something that will help make sure there are no air bubbles. Use your finger to go around the edges. Just make sure everything's nice and tight and flat. And now what I'm gonna do is, I actually want to wet the entire piece of paper so that I can do a very light green wash over the entire surface. I'm gonna let that wash go all over the paper, including the camera. And that's because I would like the environmental light to actually reflect on the camera. And I use the liquid mask to only reserve certain slivers of shiny areas on the camera that I want to reflect the brightest white. So those are going to be the brightest parts in the image. Nothing else in this painting should be as bright as that. So I'm going to wet the surface of this. I'm using a flat brush here, and I'm just going to start wiping this down. And I use a flat brush because it's an easy way to spread the water back and forth and make sure I have an even coat. It's a very humid day today, so it's a little bit easier to coat the paper. I'm just going back and forth, making sure that my rows of water touch the previous rows. That helps to drag the water downwards. And I'm actually going to use a napkin to soak up water along the edge here. I don't want too much water sitting on the surface of the tape, because that is liable to seep back into the seam between the tape and the paper, and it could cause the paint to travel inward. Now I'm going to grab my Perylene green which is going to look like this, a faint version of that. I'm just going to go ahead and apply it now. The paper is really wet still, so I'm just going to keep applying it. It should travel pretty easily down the paper, but you have to kind of help it, come down. And you'll notice that my table is actually inclined. I've angled it so water will always travel downward towards me. And that's just kind of another hack that allows you to exercise a little bit more control over watercolors in general. If you know that the water is always going to spill towards you, that's just like another way I can predict how the watercolor is going to behave. Now you can see some of the liquid mask poking through the layer of green. It's these shiny parts here. So you can see that paint is not getting onto those surfaces that are underneath the liquid mask. And as long as that paper is still wet, you can bring your brush back in, and you can do this. You can basically move the pigment around a little bit more and more. But once it starts drying, then you have to be a little bit more careful. You don't want to go over it with your brush too many more times, because any more water that you introduce to it is liable to start pooling, and it will start creating an unsightly blooming effect. So now I'm gonna let that dry for a bit. It's gonna take a little bit longer than usual because it's a very humid day today. It's like over 90% humid. And when I come back to it, it'll be ready for me to start working on the body of the camera.